When I unzipped my 5-year-old daughter Emma's backpack that Tuesday evening, I expected to find the usual collection of crumpled artwork, half-eaten snacks, and maybe a note from her teacher. What I found instead made my hands tremble and tears stream down my face before I could even process what I was looking at. Hidden beneath her lunchbox was a small notebook, and written across the cover in Emma's careful kindergarten handwriting were the words, "My Secret Helper Book." As I opened it, my heart shattered into a million pieces. But by the time I finished reading, those pieces had been put back together in a way that made me a completely different mother. If you've ever discovered something about your child that completely changed how you see them, share your story in the comments below. And if this is your first time here, please subscribe to help support this channel. I had been struggling with Emma for months. Ever since she started kindergarten at Sunshine Elementary, she had become increasingly withdrawn and difficult. She would throw tantrums every morning about going to school, would barely eat her lunch, and seemed to have developed this habit of hoarding things in her backpack. I had spoken to her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, several times, but she always assured me that Emma was doing fine academically and socially. Yet something felt wrong, and as a single mother working 2 jobs to make ends meet, I was consumed with guilt that I wasn't giving Emma the attention she needed. The notebook I found that evening contained page after page of Emma's observations about her classmates. But these weren't typical 5-year-old observations. Each page was dedicated to a different child in her class, and Emma had been documenting their struggles with the careful attention of someone much older. On the first page, she had drawn a picture of a boy named Marcus and written, "Marcus is sad because his mommy and daddy are fighting. I gave him my cookies today." The next page showed a little girl named Sophie with tears drawn on her cheeks, and Emma had written, "Sophie doesn't have warm clothes. I put my extra sweater in her cubby." Page after page revealed the same pattern. Emma had been quietly observing the needs of every child in her class and finding small ways to help them. She had been sharing her lunch with kids who didn't have enough food, comforting children whose parents were going through divorces, and even giving away toys and clothes to classmates who needed them more than she did. The notebook documented everything with the methodical precision of a social worker, complete with dates and detailed notes about each act of kindness. As I read through Emma's careful documentation, I began to understand why she had been so tired and emotional after school. She had been carrying the weight of her entire classroom on her tiny shoulders. The tantrum about going to school weren't because she didn't want to be there. They were because she was overwhelmed by the responsibility she had taken on. The barely touched lunches weren't because she wasn't hungry. They were because she was saving food to share with classmates who needed it more. One entry particularly caught my attention. It was about a boy named Tyler, and Emma had written, "Tyler smells bad and kids are mean to him. I sit with him at lunch every day so he's not alone. Mrs. Rodriguez said his family is having a hard time. I want to help, but I don't know how." Below the text, she had drawn a picture of herself and Tyler sitting together at a lunch table, both of them smiling. I realized that all those items I thought Emma was hoarding in her backpack were actually supplies she was collecting to help her classmates. The extra pencils, the tissues, the small toys, even the Band-Aids she had been taking from our medicine cabinet, they were all part of her secret mission to take care of everyone around her. My daughter, who I had been worried wasn't adjusting well to school, was actually functioning as the unofficial counselor and caregiver for her entire kindergarten class. The next morning, I did something I had never done before. Instead of rushing Emma off to school while I got ready for work, I sat down with her at the breakfast table and had a real conversation. I showed her the notebook and told her I had found it, expecting her to be embarrassed or upset. Instead, she looked at me with those big brown eyes and said, "Mommy, there are so many kids at school who are sad or don't have what they need. I just wanted to help them feel better like you helped me feel better when I'm sad." My heart broke all over again. But this time it was breaking with pride rather than worry. I asked Emma to tell me more about her classmates, and she opened up in a way she never had before. She told me about Marcus, whose parents were getting divorced and who often came to school without breakfast. She told me about Sophie, whose family had recently moved to the United States and was struggling financially. She told me about Tyler, whose single father was working 3 jobs and often didn't have time to do laundry or buy new clothes when Tyler outgrew his old ones. As Emma spoke, I realized that my 5-year-old daughter had been doing something that most adults struggle with. She had been practicing radical empathy, seeing beyond the surface of her classmates' behavior to understand their underlying needs. When Marcus was acting out, instead of avoiding him like the other kids did, Emma saw that he was hurting and needed comfort. When Sophie was quiet and withdrawn, Emma recognized that she needed friendship and practical support. When Tyler was being teased by other children, Emma chose to stand by him rather than join in or ignore the situation. I called in late to work that morning and drove Emma to school myself instead of putting her on the bus. I asked if I could speak with Mrs. Rodriguez before class started, and when I showed her Emma's notebook, her eyes filled with tears just like mine had. She told me she had noticed Emma's kindness toward her classmates but had no idea about the extent of her efforts, or the emotional burden she was carrying. Mrs. Rodriguez shared some things with me that she hadn't mentioned in our previous conversations. She told me about how Emma had been the one to help Marcus calm down during his meltdowns, how she had been sharing her art supplies with Sophie, and how she had been the only child willing to be Tyler's partner for class projects. She said that Emma's presence in the classroom had actually improved the overall dynamic among the students, but she was concerned about whether Emma was taking on too much responsibility for such a young child. Together, we decided to find a way to channel Emma's natural empathy and desire to help into something more sustainable and appropriate for her age. Mrs. Rodriguez suggested starting a classroom kindness project where all the students could participate in helping each other, with Emma as one of several student leaders rather than carrying the entire burden herself. She also agreed to keep a closer eye on the children Emma had identified as needing extra support, and to reach out to their families to see how the school could help. Over the following weeks, something beautiful began to happen in Emma's classroom. The kindness project that started with Emma's secret notebook grew into a school-wide initiative. Students in other grades heard about what the kindergartners were doing and wanted to start their own kindness projects. Parents began volunteering more, bringing in extra supplies and snacks for children who needed them. The school social worker became more involved, connecting families with resources and support services. But the most amazing transformation was in Emma herself. Once she wasn't carrying the emotional weight of the entire classroom alone, she began to flourish in ways I had never seen before. She started coming home from school excited to tell me about her day. Her morning tantrums disappeared completely. She began eating her full lunch again because she knew that the school now had systems in place to make sure no child went hungry. She was still incredibly empathetic and kind, but now she was also able to just be a kid. The notebook entries changed too. Instead of documenting problems and trying to solve them all by herself, Emma began writing about the successes of the kindness project. She wrote about how Marcus's parents had started communicating better and how much happier he seemed. She wrote about how Sophie's family had connected with other immigrant families in the community, and how Sophie was now one of the most popular kids in class. She wrote about how Tyler's father had been able to find a better paying job with more regular hours, and how Tyler now came to school clean and confident. One evening, about 2 months after I had first discovered the notebook, Emma came to me with a new entry she wanted to share. This one was different from all the others. Instead of being about helping a classmate, it was about herself. She had written, "Today I learned that helping people feels good, but it feels even better when everyone helps together. I don't have to fix everything by myself. Mommy and Mrs. Rodriguez and all the other kids can help too. That makes me happy." Reading those words, I realized that Emma had learned something that many adults never figure out. She had learned that empathy and compassion are wonderful qualities, but that trying to solve everyone's problems alone can be overwhelming and unsustainable. She had learned that the most effective way to help others is often to work together as a community, sharing both the responsibility and the joy of making a difference. The Kindness Project continued to grow throughout the school year. By the end of kindergarten, Emma's class had collected hundreds of books for children who didn't have any at home, had raised money to buy winter coats for families in need, and had created a buddy system where older students were paired with younger ones who needed extra support. The project had grown far beyond what any of us could have imagined when I first found that little notebook in Emma's backpack. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome was the way the project had strengthened the relationships between parents, teachers, and students. Families that had never spoken before were now friends. Teachers were more aware of the challenges their students faced outside of school. Children were learning not just academic subjects, but also empathy, cooperation, and the power of community action. Emma's kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, later told me that in her 20 years of teaching, she had never seen a single child have such a positive impact on an entire school community. She said that Emma's notebook had opened everyone's eyes to the fact that even very young children are capable of incredible empathy and wisdom, and that sometimes the most profound changes start with the smallest acts of kindness. As I reflect on that discovery now, over a year later, I realized that finding Emma's notebook was a turning point not just for her, but for our entire family. It taught me to look beyond surface behaviors, to understand the deeper motivations behind my daughter's actions. It showed me that children are often much more perceptive and caring than we give them credit for. Most importantly, it reminded me that the qualities I had been worried about in Emma, her sensitivity, her intense emotional reactions, her tendency to take things seriously, were actually her greatest strengths. Emma is now in first grade, and the Kindness Project continues in a new classroom with a new teacher who was eager to build on what Mrs. Rodriguez had started. Emma still keeps a notebook, but now it's filled with positive observations about her classmates and ideas for group projects rather than solitary rescue missions. She has learned to balance her natural desire to help others with taking care of herself, and she has discovered the joy of being part of a caring community rather than trying to be everyone's sole source of support. The other children from Emma's kindergarten class have carried the lessons they learned into their new grades as well. Marcus, whose parents' marriage improved significantly after they got counseling, has become known for his ability to help other children work through conflicts. Sophie, whose family is now thriving in their new community, has started a program to help other immigrant children feel welcome at school. Tyler, whose confidence has grown tremendously, has become a leader in anti-bullying initiatives. But beyond the individual success stories, what strikes me most about this experience is how it changed my perspective on parenting. Before I found that notebook, I was so focused on trying to fix what I thought was wrong with Emma that I completely missed what was right with her. I was so worried about her fitting in and being normal that I failed to recognize the extraordinary gift she had for seeing and responding to the needs of others. Now I understand that my job as Emma's mother isn't to change her sensitive nature or her deep empathy, but to help her channel these qualities in healthy and sustainable ways. It's to teach her that caring about others is a beautiful thing, but that she also needs to care for herself. It's to help her understand that she can make a difference in the world, but that she doesn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. The notebook that made me cry that Tuesday evening has become one of my most treasured possessions. I keep it in a special box in my bedroom, along with the updated notebooks Emma continues to create. Sometimes, when I'm having a difficult day or feeling overwhelmed by the challenges of single parenthood, I take it out and read through Emma's observations and acts of kindness. It reminds me of the incredible human being I'm raising and gives me hope for the future. Emma's story has also inspired changes in how I approach my own relationships and my work. I've become more observant of the people around me, more willing to offer help when I see someone struggling, and more aware of the power of small acts of kindness. I've also become more involved in my community, volunteering at Emma's school and participating in local initiatives to support families in need. The ripple effects of finding that notebook continue to spread in ways I never could have anticipated. Other parents have heard Emma's story and have started their own kindness projects with their children. Teachers at other schools have implemented similar programs in their classrooms. The local newspaper even wrote an article about the initiative, inspiring other communities to start their own efforts to support children and families. But perhaps the most important lesson I've learned from this experience is about the power of really seeing our children. So often as parents, we get caught up in our expectations and worries that we miss who our children actually are. We focus so much on the problems we think need to be solved that we overlook the strengths and gifts our children already possess. We worry so much about preparing them for the future that we fail to appreciate the incredible human beings they are right now. Emma taught me that children have an innate wisdom about what matters most in life. They understand, in a way that adults often forget, that kindness and connection are more important than competition and achievement. They know that taking care of each other is not just nice to do, but essential to creating a world where everyone can thrive. When people ask me now about Emma's remarkable empathy and her ability to see the needs of others, I tell them that these aren't skills I taught her. These are gifts she was born with, gifts that I almost missed because I was too focused on worrying about whether she was adjusting properly to school. My role as her parent has been to nurture these gifts, to help her understand how to use them wisely, and to make sure she knows that her sensitivity and caring nature are strengths, not weaknesses. Today, Emma is thriving in ways that go far beyond academic achievement. She has close friendships with children from all different backgrounds and circumstances. She is confident in her ability to make a positive difference in the lives of others. She has learned to balance her desire to help with her own needs for rest, play, and childhood joy. Most importantly, she knows that she is valued not just for what she can do for others, but for who she is as a person. The notebook that once made me cry with worry now makes me cry with pride and gratitude. It represents not just Emma's beautiful heart, but also the journey we've been on together as a family. It reminds me that sometimes the things that worry us most about our children are actually their greatest gifts to the world. It shows me that children are capable of wisdom and compassion that can transform entire communities. As Emma continues to grow and face new challenges, I know there will be other moments that test my understanding of who she is and what she needs. But I also know that I now have the tools to look beyond surface behaviors to see the heart of who she is. I know to ask questions instead of making assumptions, to listen instead of immediately trying to fix, and to appreciate the unique gifts she brings to the world. The story of Emma's Secret Helper book has become a story our whole family tells, a reminder of the power of empathy, the importance of community, and the incredible wisdom that children possess. It has taught us all that the smallest acts of kindness can create the biggest changes, that helping others is most effective when we work together, and that sometimes the very qualities that worry us about our children are the ones that will help them change the world. If you found Emma's story as moving as I hope you did, please share it with other parents who might need to hear it today. Sometimes we all need reminders that our children's sensitivity and empathy are gifts to be celebrated, not problems to be solved. And please, take a moment to really look at your own children today, to see beyond any behaviors that might worry you, and to appreciate the unique and beautiful human beings they already are. You never know what amazing discoveries you might make in their backpacks, their notebooks, or simply in taking the time to truly listen to their hearts.